The Tsaesci in the Elder Scrolls 6, is it gonna happen? Probably not, but there could be a few arguments made for why it is a possibility, and more so, why it would be kind of cool just to have them in there. So let's talk about it. This is kind of similar to when I was talking about the Slowed possibly being in the game, whereas if they were, they wouldn't be like a playable race or anything. I wouldn't assume so. Anything's possible, of course. You can believe what you want, but what I would initially, and I think rightly so, assume is that if they were included in the game, they would end up being either main villains or DLC villains, or maybe like a third party in the game that you'd have to deal with. And I think that could offer some really cool layers to it as well. Of course, this would depend on where exactly the game took place, and it would probably go against my personal theory that the game's going to take place in Hammerfell. So if they were to be included in the game, maybe somewhere along the side of Morrowind or maybe Cyrodiil once again, would be a good spot to throw them in there as sort of an antagonist. Now, why do the Tsaesci make good antagonists potentially? Well, there's a lot of stuff we don't know about them so far, and everything that we do know about them points towards them being a really evil race with no good qualities or intentions whatsoever. They seem to be a very secret race that wants to not only wage war right in your face, but they also like to infiltrate into nobility lines and other stuff like that. So it would be really interesting to see if they could potentially maybe put some assassins in the game or something that were Tsaesci lineages, or if they went with the full-on invasion things from Akavir, like the 5th Akavir invasion or whatever the count's up to right now. It'd be really interesting to see a bunch of snake people trying to attack Tamriel in some way, shape, or form. Now that raises the question, what would the Tsaesci actually look like? How would they handle that? Because there's conflicting stuff regarding that. People sometimes think they look like, you know, top half human, bottom half snake. Other times they say, oh, they're just kind of like humans, but they worship snakes, or they look a lot more Eastern Asian culture, so very samurai-like. That's what they based the Blades armor and weapons on, was from their past and first encounters with the Tsaesci. So if they were to invade, I think that having that Eastern Asian influence would be a given. It would just come down to whether or not they want to make them very human, or if they want to go for a more bestial approach to do everything. Nonetheless, though, they'd be a great candidate to have as a main villain, because we're not attached to them in any way, so slicing through them wouldn't have a whole lot of, you know, people wouldn't be angry that they're slicing through the Tsaesci, because they associate and affiliate with that race. No one's clamoring to be one in the next games, so having them as kind of like the inconsequential villain, you know, the foot soldiers that you can slice through akin to like orcs or stormtroopers, that's always a good thing to have in games, because it eliminates any of the potential politics that's involved, unless you want that in your game, which is totally acceptable too. But it would be nice to have everyone in Tamriel, maybe, you know, like the Nords and the Altmer, all band together to fight against a common enemy. And then we get into the topic of, well, this is probably going to take place after Skyrim in the Elder Scrolls 6, so if they were to include them, dragons are back, and there was, of course, stories that they would ride dragons into battle and everything, so there is the potential that maybe the dragons team up with them because they killed Paarthurnax or some stupid thing, and then you have to fight some dragon-riding snake people. That'd be a pretty cool premise for a game, I think. I think the one big hurdle that Bethesda would have to get over with this specifically is really just fleshing out their lore a lot more than they have already. That could also be a benefit, though, because it's not like they have to retcon anything. Everything that we know about them is really up to rumors. We've never really seen them anywhere or heard anything about them beyond legends and small references. So they have a lot of leeway when they're making the race as to how they want to present them, what their attitudes are and everything. But it also presents the challenge of having to put more effort into creating an entirely new section of the Elder Scrolls universe. Like, this is people from a continent that we've never been influenced by at all. We've never seen it, really, apart from, like I said, hearing it in a couple books or maybe a few lines of dialogue in the games. So they would have to kind of create this entire race and culture from basically nothing. That being said, I really do like the idea that we're getting a more expanded version of Tamriel, of the Elder Scrolls as a universe, of Nirn, because honestly, we've seen so much of Imperials and Nords and, you know, Dark Elves and all this other stuff that we kind of want something new. At least I would love to see something completely new brought into the series, because, of course, that would expand on everything that we already know, give everyone more stuff to talk about and speculate on, because at this point, what can you speculate on in regards to any of the major races in the game? You know what their attitudes are, you know all the famous people and the legends from them, so we're kind of like sitting on our hands a little bit here. I like the idea of the Tsaesci being in the Elder Scrolls 6. I'm not convinced that's going to happen, and depending on where it's set, like I said at the start, that's going to influence whether or not they could have any sort of involvement in it, really. So, yeah, it'll be interesting if they're in it, but don't hold your breath. I don't think it's a very likely possibility right now, at least. What do you think about the Tsaesci in the Elder Scrolls 6? If you have any opinions or comments on it, leave them down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me, two ways you can do that. Throw a tip if you're watching on VidMe. I also have a Patreon that you can donate $1 to if you feel like doing that. Link to that down in the description. I am PattyJack, and I'll see you next time.
It'd be nice to have the Tsaesci as the bad guys of the game, so everyone will get off my back as an orc. Seriously, every time I go into town, it's always, please don't lay waste to our petty village. Look, peasants, if I wanted rotten fruit, spoiled meat, and the ugliest lunches ever, then I'd barrage your village, but I don't. I just stop by to steal a pig.